This video is about the genetic topic, which is very important for part 1 as well as for part 2. Okay, so guys, let's start with our video on genetics. So we know about all the abnormalities and the aneuploidies that can arise because of the many factors, and that is why it's really important to know the genetics. Mosaicism arises from the error in the mitosis that occurs any time after the conception and results in an individual having more than one cell line. Now, this error can affect the genetic material at different areas. So, when it affects the somatic cells, or it can just affect the germ cells, it is going to act differently, right? So when there is a somatic mosaicism, the effect of mosaicism is dependent on the percentage of the affected cells, right? So for example, if the percentage of the affected cells are just for your little finger, so they are not going to really affect or cause any abnormality in general. But if the cells in the brain are affected, and if there is an error there, then it is going to result in the neurological full-blown aneuploidies or the abnormalities that we see, right? So it is not possible to predict the percentage of the cells that are affected, and that is why it is not possible to predict the phenotype. So like a patient who is high risk for Downs comes to us, we cannot tell how much the baby is going to get affected. So the baby may have just mild changes or mild factors associated with Downs, or maybe a severe blown up Down syndrome. Okay, but remember, it is always going to be milder than the pure abnormality. Now, when there is gonadal mosaicism, the genetic mutation is present in a proportion of the gonadal cells, and that is why it is going to affect the offsprings, right? So the offsprings with dominant conditions like Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, and in patients in whom the parents are phenotypically and genetically normal but have affected children, they will be seeing the inheritance of these mutations. The germ cell mutations are important when considering the implications for recurrence of conditions. For example, in case of Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, approximately 2/3 of the cases arise from the maternal carriers, and around 5 to 10 arise because of the gonadal mosaicism, 25 to 30% due to the new mutations. So remember, when they affect the germ cells, they are going to affect the gonadal cells. uh, Specifically, they are going to cause the problems of inheritance. So there are different uh, terms that we learn in genetics, and they are malformation. So what is malformation? It is an inherent abnormality in the early embryonic life. So that is a malformation, like a congenital heart disease. Disruption is because of the external pressure on the fetus. For example, in oligo, there will be the external pressure on the fetus that will result in the structural abnormalities, and this is called as disruption. Deformity or deformation is abnormal development as a result of external interference. It can either be because of the teratogens or because of the maternal infections or trauma, for examples from amniotic bands. Dysplasia, it results from abnormal tissue development. So from the development itself, there is abnormal tissue, and this abnormal tissue results in dysplasia, like in cases of schizencephaly, which involves the brain and the organ system. So it may affect uh, a particular area or a particular organ, or it may affect a complete organ system, right? So that is dysplasia. What is a syndrome? Syndrome refers to the collection of abnormalities whose pathogenesis is linked like Down syndrome, Mickel-Gruber syndrome, they result from a single gene disorder or collection of abnormalities related from environmental exposure to teratogens, for example, the fetal alcohol syndrome. So they are all the pathogenesis, the collection of the abnormalities that are seen together, but the pathogenesis is linked to each other. Sequence is the sequence of events that happen, right? So a single defect can have cascading effect on the others, for example, in Potters. So because of the oligo that we see in Potters, the baby will have talipes because of the disruption, then hip dislocation and lung hypoplasia. So all these are sequence of oligohydramnios. Coming to inheritance, now it can be many types and multifactorial. Of course, as the name suggests, is because of many factors. And it, like in cases of diabetes, in cases of cancer, there can be many things that can be responsible for this malformations or diseases, right? So the clinical assessment of the mode of inheritance in couple presenting with a positive family history of a condition, a family tree should always be looked into, right? Because this may enable the pattern of inheritance to be identified and will also allow the individual risk to be quantified. A trait or condition determined by a gene on the autosome is said to be demonstrated is said to demonstrate the autosomal inheritance, and those determine the gene on the sex chromosome as showing sex-linked inheritance. Okay, so you should always see what type of inheritance it is, and that can be seen by a family tree. Now, autosomal dominant condition, we know that even if there is one mutated allele, it is going to affect the babies, and in those cases, the offspring, 1 in 2 offsprings, that means 50% of the offsprings are going to get affected, not carriers, they are going to get affected. Okay, the features of autosomal dominant condition can vary between the members of the family, and it can appear that some members are unaffected while some will have abnormal genes, some will be carriers, and some will be completely affected by that. And this condition can appear to uh, affect around 50% of the babies. So this is a mnemonic that is very powerful dominant humans. The von Willebrand stands for V, pseudo-hypoparathyroidism, or say for example in that case hypoparathyroidism stands for P. So you may remember pseudo, an extra thing to remember. Dystrophia myotonica for D, osteogenesis imperfecta or Osler-Weber-Renju syndrome for D, Marfan syndrome for M, intermittent porphyria, neurofibromatosis, achondroplasia or adult polycystic kidney disease, Noonan syndrome, tuberous sclerosis, hypercholesterolemia, Huntington's syndrome, hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, hereditary spherocytosis, hereditary non-polyposis coli, and hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia. So there are 6H, dominant, and VP. So very powerful dominant humans. Better to remember now. Remember, the autosomal recessive mostly are metabolic disorders. So they are like alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, ataxia telangiectasia, beta thalassemia, congenital adrenal hyperplasia. So first, let us take the metabolic disorders like alkaptonuria, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, galactosemia, glycogen storage disorders, homocystinuria, phenylketonuria, right? Wilson's disease, while the others one that are very important to remember are sickle cell anemia. Okay, sickle cell anemia, you should be remembering the cystic fibrosis and congenital adrenal hyperplasia, very, very important to remember. And G6PD and all the other metabolic disorders, they belong to autosomal recessive. So remember beta thalassemia, sickle cell anemia, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, cystic fibrosis are very commonly asked questions from autosomal recessive. Okay, and the most common metabolic disorder that is generally asked is phenylketonuria. Now remember the X-linked recessive conditions. It has got muscular dystrophies, Duchenne's as well as Becker's, hemophilias. So hemophilia are X-linked recessive disorders, right? Then you have testicular feminization syndrome, Biskott-Aldrich syndrome. All these are X-linked recessive. X-linked dominant are vitamin D resistant rickets, Rett syndrome, and remember, very important syndrome to remember here is Fragile X. Y-linked are very little. We don't know much about it. We only know about the hairy ears that can occur because of the Y-linked condition. And see here is a very important table, and these are very commonly asked questions. So the risk of the offspring in autosomal recessive is around 1 in 4 to have the condition. To have the condition or to get affected by the condition is 1 in 2 in autosomal dominant, and X-linked recessive will be 1 in 2. So what are the autosomal recessive conditions? Cystic fibrosis, sickle cell anemia, beta thalassemia, and you can do the PGDs in all three of them. Okay. For autosomal dominant, we have seen Marfan's, Huntington's are very common to remember, very important to remember. Remember BRCA1 and BRCA2 again belongs to autosomal recessive, autosomal dominant. Very important to remember because they are related to the breast cancer and also to the ovarian cancers, right? X-linked recessive are Duchenne's muscular dystrophy and hemophilias, right? Now, there are different types of abnormalities. There can be numerical abnormalities, trisomy, monosomy, polyploidies, or there can be translocations, deletions, insertions, or even inversions. So what are they? So whenever there is either a gain or a loss of a chromosome, then it is aneuploidy. When there is addition of extra sets of chromosomes, it is polyploidy. So it can be triploidy, tetraploidy, and monosomy when there is a loss of chromosome. Now, trisomy, we very commonly know the trisomies, and we most of the times know about the trisomy 21, which is Down syndrome, right? So you should be knowing everything about this Down syndrome because it will be there for your part 2 as well as for your part 3. The other trisomies which you should be knowing about is trisomy 18 and trisomy 13, which is Edwards and Patau's respectively. Then remember that all these trisomies, they are mostly affected. The trisomy 21 particularly is most commonly due to the failure of separation of one of the pairs of the homologous chromosomes during the anaphase of the maternal meiosis 1. Okay, this is otherwise known as non-disjunction. So you should remember this is a very commonly asked question and a very commonly wrongly answered question because you write as trisomy as the reason for Downs, and it is actually non-disjunction, which is failure of separation of one of the pairs of homologous chromosomes in the anaphase of meiosis 1. Okay, so trisomy can also be due to non-disjunction during the meiosis 2, but this is less common. Either way, the gametes will receive 2 homologous chromosomes. It is not known why non-disjunction becomes more common in advancing age. So remember, non-disjunction goes on increasing with increase in the age. Okay, so it may either be because of the hormonal changes or because of the abnormality in the spindle cell development that occurs with the increase in the maternal age. Now, monosomy, we know the condition very commonly known as Turner syndrome, which is 45XO, and the women here will be having one less chromosome, that is 45 chromosomes only, and this also results in non-disjunction, and from the loss of chromosome as it moves to the pole of the cell during the anaphase. So there is anaphase lag, right? Polyploidy, we know about triploidy, we know about tetraploidy. It's very commonly seen in the molar pregnancies, especially the partial molar pregnancies. We see the triploidies wherein there is addition of one extra set of chromosomes, tetraploidies where there is addition of 2 extra sets of chromosomes, right? So it when it is coming from the paternal side, it results in the maternal molar changes. When it is mostly from the maternal side, it results in the small placenta. So we know that most of the partial molar pregnancies are because of the triploidies, right? Now, the chromosomal structural abnormalities can result from the breakage with the chromosomes and the chromosomes joining in the different arrangements. And when the genetic material remains the same, so it is balanced, then it is called as balanced translocation. However, it can even be unbalanced with loss or gain of genetic material, wherein we call it as unbalanced translocation. That causes adverse clinical effects, and that can sometimes be very severe. Now we know about the translocations, the Robertsonian as well as the reciprocal. It's really important to remember both these because they come up as questions. So Robertsonian, it occurs mostly in the acrocentric chromosomes. Okay, so what happens here is all the chromosomes, we know that they have a long arm and a short petit arm, right? So in the acrocentric chromosomes, the chromosome is having the centromere near the end of the chromosome, right? So the short arm is carrying very little information, and it may sometimes not even be seen. Okay, so in the acrocentric chromosome, you cannot even see the petit arm. So there is very little valuable information on that, and if that information is lost, it is not going to affect any phenotypic change. So in these translocation, what happens is when these two acrocentric chromosomes, they lose their short arms, they become joined together, and this is termed as Robertsonian translocation. The net result is that the parent may have only 45 chromosomes, but we will still have the appropriate amount of genetic material as the two chromosomes are joined together. So there is no genetic material that is lost even if the parent has got 45 chromosomes. The significance of this is at the reproduction, when they can either pass on the single double chromosome or a normal pair, both of which lead to a normal spring, or they can pass on the double chromosome with one of the normal pair, which results in a trisomic offspring. Okay, so although you can count the chromosomes, there would still only be 46 in number. So remember, in Robertsonian translocation, on a broader basis, that the parents are not affected, the babies are affected. They may have miscarriages, and commonly seen in women who have got recurrent miscarriages, right? So when you do the karyotype of them, you may find that one of the parents may just have 45 XO, okay, and they are not phenotypically affected. So the types of translocations, we have seen what Robertsonian is, and it's very common between in the acrocentric chromosomes, and they are between 1314, 1322, and 2122. Okay, the significance of Robertsonian translocations involves chromosome 21. It is at increased chance of the children getting affected, and there could be almost 100% chance that in case when the parent is carrying 2121 Robertsonian translocation. So remember that the babies get affected almost 100% in 2121 Robertsonian translocation. Again, this is a very commonly asked question. Translocations account for 2 to 3% of all the Down syndrome. It is therefore important to test the chromosomes of any infant born with the Down syndrome to identify the possible translocations due to implications for future pregnancies of the couple. Okay. Now, what is reciprocal? As the name suggests, there is breakage of two metacentric chromosomes here, so they are not acrocentric. Remember, metacentric are where the centromere is in the middle. Now what happens is they get broken, and then there is reciprocal translocation, so there is exchange of material. So mostly the long arms of the chromosome 11 and 22 are more commonly involved in this reciprocal translocation, but most of the times the genetic material is not lost. So the incidence is around 1 in 500. The total number of chromosomes are 46 because we are not losing the chromosome. The individuals with balanced reciprocal translocation will be phenotypically normal. Segregation at meiosis may result in offspring inheriting an unbalanced chromosomal complement, resulting in increased risk of miscarriage and congenital abnormalities. So remember, even the reciprocal translocations can be balanced with giving the right amount of genetic material, or unbalanced where some part of it may be lost. Okay. So remember, the abnormal offspring may get, there is a risk of that abnormal offspring in around 1 to 10% of the people, or of the babies, in reciprocal translocation. Deletions, as the name suggests, is the loss of part of chromosome, and it occurs very commonly in Cry-Ducat syndrome. And again, they'll ask you a question on DiGeorge syndrome. Cry-Ducat is related to deletion of chromosome, deletion of part of chromosome 5. The babies will have neurodevelopmental problems and will have cat-like cry, and they will also have episodes of hypotonia and cyanosis. Whereas DiGeorge syndrome, there is deletion of 22q11.2. So there is deletion of chromosome, a part of deletion of chromosome 22, and here there is problem associated with the congenital heart diseases, and the patients will have problems with the outflow tract, something like tetralogy of Fallot, truncus arteriosus. Okay, so they may also have abnormalities of parathyroid gland, which result in neonatal hypocalcemia. Okay, so that is DiGeorge syndrome. In addition, the thymus may be underdeveloped, and there can be, or it can even be absent, resulting in T lymphocyte population and associated immune dysfunction. Okay, so deletions, Cry-Ducat and DiGeorge. Insertion, as the name suggests, some material is getting inserted. So one chromosome is getting inserted into another. When the total amount is unchanged of the genetic material, of course, it is not going to affect, but when it is unbalanced, it is going to cause problems, and it results in 50% of the gametes inheriting either the deletion or insertion, therefore resulting in loss or exchange or excess of genetic materials with the associated outcome. So whenever there is unbalanced genetic material going during any of these conditions, it is going to result in problems with the offspring and may lead to miscarriages, right? Inversion, that is a break in the chromosome resulting in the reversal of the segment of the chromosome, is called as inversion. It can be pericentric, where it is near the centromere, so involving the centromere. Paracentric, where it involves only one arm of the chromosome. As long as the inversion is balanced, it should not cause any adverse effects unless the break point happened to occur within the gene. However, the inversions can result in unbalanced chromosomes, resulting in offsprings with important adverse clinical effects. And it is important to check the parental karyotype. If this is a family inversion, it is unlikely to be of clinical significance. Okay? So the basic thing goes right with all of them. So when it is balanced, not to worry about. If it is unbalanced, it will result in problems. Very important to remember in this Down syndrome, taken from the RCUG site, and it is free for some time now in this pandemic, so you all can really visit it if you want. So the overall incidence of Down syndrome is 1 in 700. The incidence is higher at conception, but 60% of the cases are miscarried and 20% are stillborn. Remember, you need not remember the numbers here, but you need to see that as the maternal age increases, the incidence increases, and you may just remember the particular numbers, like at the age of 20, the risk is around 1 in 1,500. So that is the background risk, right? So at the age of 30, it increases to 1 in 895, that is 1 in 900 women. At the age of 40, it increases to 1 in 97, that is around 1 in 100 women. And at the age of 42, it is very, very high. So around 1 in 2 women will have, around 1 in 55 women will have a baby who is affected with Down syndrome. So that's a very high risk. So out of 50 women who are coming to you, one of them will have baby who is having Down syndrome at the age of 42. So remember, when you have a baby who has got Down syndrome, and when you are young, your background risk is just 0.067%. So that is 1 in 1,500. But when you have a baby who has got Downs, and then the risk of recurrence and the new risk for the another baby is increased uh, very tremendously, right? So the basic background risk for an 18-year-old woman, a girl, is around 1.067, whereas when they have a baby who has got Downs, the risk increases to 0.5. For a woman who is 41 years of old age and now she has got a baby who has got Down syndrome, her basic risk at that age was 1%. So that is around 1 in 100. And when she has a baby which has got Downs, then the risk increases only by 0.56 to 7.75. So the increase in the risk with one baby having Downs is remains the same in all the ages. That does not change. And so the new risk is just 1.56. So it is just minimally above the background risk that was 1%. Okay. So that's how the babies of Down syndrome look like, and you know, the slanting eyes, the saddle nose, and everything. Okay. It's really important to remember. I think we all know about the features of Down syndrome, but something that we should not miss because we are not very much into the trisomy 18 and 13, which are again very commonly asked. Remember, 90% of this trisomy 18, which is Edwards syndrome, will have abnormalities which are detectable on the ultrasound in the second trimester. And again, here the risk increases with the increase in the age. This again is because of maternal non-disjunction in 95% of the time, and the risk of recurrence is around 0.75 to 1%. Now, important things to remember here for your answers. So, choroid plexus, strawberry skull, enlarged cisterna magna, low set ears, rocker bottom foot, polyhydramnios are very, very typical of trisomy 18. So, remember rocker bottom foot, club foot, polyhydramnios, they will always put to mention trisomy 18. So, whenever you have this question, they will try to put this rocker bottom foot so that you have that answer as trisomy 18, because the other things can be seen in Downs as well as in Pataus. Okay. This is how the Edwards syndrome will look like. They'll have small head, microcephaly. They'll have ears are malformed. They are low set. The back of the head is prominent. The mouth and jaw are small. The hands are clenched. Index finger overlaps the other. And there is cleft lip. Very important to remember. Trisomy 13, Patau syndrome, again, same. It increases with the increase in the age. And you have to remember that these patients will have holoprosencephaly. So there is problem, structural defect in the midline, and that results in holoprosencephaly. That results in agenesis of corpus callosum, Dandy-Walker syndrome, and remember it is associated with polydactyly. So P of polydactyly goes with P of Pataus, okay, and the other things can again be seen in other syndromes too. So here, approximately around 10% of the cases are due to mosaicism, unbalanced translocations, and the risk of recurrence is approximately the same as that of Edwards, that is 0.75 to 1%. This is how the trisomy 13 baby looks like, that is the Pataus baby. There'll be absent eyebrows, there'll be cleft lip, cleft palate, there'll be dysplastic and malformed ears, clenched hands, and there'll be polydactyly. Okay, there'll be undescended abnormal chest piece. Turner syndrome, again, a very important syndrome to be remembered. Remember, these girls, they'll have XO, 45XO, which is a monosomy, and the risk is around 1 in 2,500, with the finding of edema, which can be generalized. So there can be hydrops or localized to the back of the fetal neck. So there is cystic hygroma there. The clinical features will also involve short girls with neck webbing, short carrying angles which are wide at the elbow. Then they have ovarian failure, so due to the streak gonads, they have got low hairline, and they are associated with heart diseases in 20% of the cases. These women, they need to be given sex hormones for the development of the secondary sexual characteristics. And remember, along with the sex hormones, it's really important to give them growth hormones for increasing the height, right? And these patients, if they are primary Turners, they will not have periods. They'll be having primary amenorrhea, but if they are mosaic, they have premature ovarian failure or secondary amenorrhea. Okay. Remember, these Turner's patient can have coarctation of aorta. That can be a problem during the delivery, and that is why they need to be delivered by cesarean section. And if at all they come for vaginal delivery, and you need to do it, in an area where cardiac surgery can be done. Now, the Klinefelter syndrome, also known as 47XXY, this incidence of the Klinefelter syndrome is relatively common with 1 in 1,000 women, males that are affected. So the Klinefelters, of course, is going to affect the males. The condition can be suspected in childhood in the boys. These babies generally are having low IQ, so around 10 to 20 points below the unaffected siblings. These males will be very tall, their lower limbs will be very long, and they will have problems of infertility, right? They'll have gynecomastia, and because of which there is increased incidence of breast cancer. They'll have feminine characteristics, and the fat will be deposited like that of a female in these patients, but they'll be very long and they'll be very tall, right? And we need to give testosterone therapy in these patients to maintain the secondary sexual characteristics, but of course it is not going to improve the infertility, right? Now this is how the Turner's girl will look like and a Klinefelter's boy will look like. So the Turner's baby will have short stature, low hair face, uh, low hairline. Then there'll be fold on the skin. There'll be constriction of the aorta called as contraction. Again they may have coarctation of aorta. There'll be elbow deformity. There'll be rudimentary ovaries, streak ovaries, no menstruation, widely spaced nipples, shortened metacarpals, small fingernails, and brown spots. Whereas Klinefelter's male will be tall, slightly feminized, mildly impaired IQ, female type pubic hair, small testes, and there'll be breast development, gynecomastia. Okay. Triple X is seen in females, 1 in 1,000 is the incidence. Now, these women, they may have mild intellectual impairment. Approximately 75% of the affected women are fertile, but appears to be no increased risk for the offspring. Okay. The additional X chromosome is maternally derived in 95% of the cases and most commonly arises from non-disjunction at either meiosis 1 or 2. And the risk of recurrence is not increased from general population level of chance. So it doesn't increase. Okay. So remember about multiple Y. Again, these are the males that will have antisocial behavior and problems with the intellectual disability, right? So the incidence is around 1 in 1,000, and the physical appearance is normal, but their IQs are lower than the unaffected siblings. And here there is additional Y chromosome that occurs because of the non-disjunction in the paternal meiosis 2 or as post-zygotic event. Okay. So remember, patient with antisocial behavior and intellectual problems. So remember the incidence rates. Downs 1 in 700. We know the facial features, the specific facial features of Down syndrome and congenital heart abnormalities. Very most commonly occurring abnormality is that of heart. Then Edwards is 1 in 3000. Strawberry skull, micrognathia, rocker bottom feet, exomphalis. Patau's is 1 in 5000. So that is the incidence of Patau's. Holoprosencephaly, cardiac abnormalities, cleft lip, cleft palate, polydactyly. Turner's 1 in 2500. We have seen how it is seen in clinically. Klinefelter's 1 in 1000, triple X 1 in 1000, triple Y 1 in 1000. Okay. Now the single gene disorder, there is a problem with the single gene there, which results in the disorders. So we have seen the inheritance before, how they get inherited. Now we'll see how they are classified according to the genes that are affected. So cystic fibrosis, there is, of course, we know the CFTR gene which is affected there. A very important question that will be asked, and it's very focused because Britishers, around 1 in 25 of the Caucasian population gets affected by the cystic fibrosis. So beta thalassemia, spinal muscular atrophy, Huntington's disease, Marfan's, hemophilia, Fragile X, all these are single gene disorders. So there is problem with only a single gene resulting in the disorder. Cystic fibrosis, we know that it is autosomal recessive. We have just seen and results in chest infections, also in diabetes. And you need to give physiotherapy, you need to give antibiotics and keep an eye on the chest infections because they can sometimes be really, really fatal. So we need to keep an eye on the chest infections. These patients may even have infertility in males, and that is mainly because of the congenital absence of vas difference. Gaucher syndrome is autosomal recessive disorder. Again, it is the most common lysosomal storage disease, and it is because of the deficiency of enzyme glucocerebrosidase. Tay-Sachs is again because of the lysosomal storage problems and more seen in the Ashkenazi Jewish population. Sickle cell, we know that it is autosomal recessive, and these patients will have sickle cell crisis because of the sickling of the cells when there is less oxygen and resulting in painful crisis. Beta thalassemia, we know, result in anemia because of the problems with the beta globin synthesis and may require blood transfusion. Right? Fragile X, again a single gene disorder, results in learning disabilities in the patients and also may result in mental retardation. Huntington's disease, they will be having the disorder like that of chorea and even slowly progressive movement disorders that can be seen, sometimes even be associated with the intellectual function in Huntington's. Okay. There are two types of X-linked muscular dystrophy, that is Duchenne's and Becker's. We know that Duchenne's is more common, which has the incidence of 1 in 3,000. Okay, most sufferers are unable to walk by the age of 10 years. The less common Becker's is milder, and there will be just muscle weakness in late childhood. We know about hemophilia A and B. Remember, they are X-linked recessive, and we know that they can really cause severe bleeding problems in severe mutations, right? Now remember, these are the way of identifying the nucleoides. This is the confirmatory way by amniocentesis and by chorionic villus biopsy. Amniocentesis you can start by from 15 weeks onwards, chorionic villus biopsy from 11 to 14 weeks, and both of these can be used to detect the aneuploidies. They are diagnostic, but because they are invasive, there is a risk of miscarriage. They can again result in infections. So the risk of miscarriage is a very commonly asked question. It is around 1% with amniocentesis. Of course, when we take the sample, we need to send it for genetic investigations like FISH, QFPCR, and other things, right? So we'll see them as we go forward. Now, what is lionization? There is random inactivation of one of the X chromosomes in the females. Okay, so what happens is when the females will have two X chromosomes, so one of them gets inactive, and this in the interphase cells, this inactive chromosomes appears as darkly staining mass of chromosome, mark of chromatin, which is called as the Barr body. Now this inactivation is dependent on the activity of the cyst. You did not remember that, but just remember that this will result in the differential methylation of this chromosome and result in the abnormality. The X chromosome is, however, not totally inactivated. Otherwise, if the X chromosome is completely inactivated, all the females will be monosomy, right? So they'll be having Turners, right? So that's not the case. So in female carriers, the carriers of X autosome balanced translocation, the normal X chromosome is preferentially inactivated. The normal males will not have Barr bodies. 47XXY males, that is the Klinefelter's one, will have one Barr body, and 47XXX females will have 2 bar bodies, right? So random inactivation of the predominantly the normal X chromosome. So the one which is normal, so if that gets inactivated randomly, then it is going to result in a female being affected by X-linked recessive disorder, and that is lionization. Okay. So remember, this lionization really plays an important role in the hemophilia specifically, and that is why you see that the X-linked disorder, hemophilia, they have this problems of lionization, and the females they get affected, they are the carriers, and the males, sorry, the females are the carriers and the males get affected, right? Now there's rapid prenatal diagnosis techniques which are very important to remember, because this is how we know whether the baby is affected or not. So the karyotype will take 2 to 3 weeks, while the other rapid diagnostic tests can be available within 24 to 48 hours. Okay. So however, the rapid tests only analyze specific chromosomes. So remember this, whenever you get the rapid results, they are just the provisional results, and they'll see only few chromosomes. They'll not check the whole of the matrix there. So they'll be mostly checking 13, 18, 21, X and Y. Okay. Now going to fish, which is fluorescence in situ hybridization. So we know that there is fluorescent labeling of the chromosomal specific DNA sequences, and they are used to identify the chromosome copy number. Here they use non-dividing interface cells. 3 chromosomes can be detected at the same time. Around maximum 5 to 12 chromosomes can be detected. There are different colors, red, blue and green, which are used. Commercial kits are available. Okay. They are designed to detect the specific aneuploidies and will not detect the other abnormalities or the structural chromosomal defect. The misdiagnosis may be due to maternal cell contamination, maybe because of the structural chromosomal abnormalities, maybe because of the DNA polymorphism, or because of the Musia system. Now something called as QFPCR, which we know about, it uses the quantitative fluorescence PCR. Here what they do is the non-coding gene of the DNA, that region, that non-coding region is amplified by the PCR on the gel, and then they check the amount of the DNA also, and they also see what are the different sizes of if 3 copies are present of different sizes, then they will see what are the differences in the migration of the gel, and if 2 are detectable, this will also be detectable because of the total quantity of DNA can also be seen on PCR. So remember, maternal cell contamination, mosaicism can be detected here. The failure of DNA amplification can occur in around 0.1%, so there can be failure rates of around 1.1% with PCR. And whenever you want to see a single cell, when you want to analyze a single cell, then you need not use PCR, then FISH is preferred. Okay. Now something called as comparative genomic hybridization, that is CGH, where FISH is only capable of looking at a handful of chromosomes, so around 5 to 12. CGH can interrogate all the chromosomes in a sample. The method requires whole genomic amplification of the DNA from the test cell, which is then labeled with the fluorochrome and compared with the DNA from a chromosomally normal control. Okay, so here there is something called as a microarray CGH. It is more recent variation, and like CGH, it is generic protocol which can be used to detect the abnormal chromosomal rearrangement while simultaneously screens for aneuploidies. So it can detect chromosomal rearrangements. So we know about the translocations and also check the aneuploidy. Okay. Unlike CGH, the analysis can be completed much more rapidly. So it can be done very rapidly, and it will avoid the need to cryopreserve the embryos after the biopsy. So you will get early results with CGH. What is karyomapping? It enables the diagnosis of more than one monogenic disorder or monogenic disorder and chromosomal rearrangement simultaneously. So both chromosomal rearrangement as well as a monogenic disorder with karyomapping. It is more rapid workup as compared with the conventional methods, It also enables the detection of most forms of aneuploidy, which could improve the implantation and the birth rate following the transfer of an unaffected embryo. However, the disadvantage of aneuploidy screening include the mosaicism and self-correction, resulting in potential euploid embryos being discarded. Okay, so sometimes it may happen that even the good embryos may just get discarded because it's an aneuploidy screening and may have false results sometimes. So NGS is about next generation sequencing. It is a very new technology, and here uh, it is a relatively new technology that can potentially be used to ascertain the number of the chromosomes in the embryo biopsy. Okay, or to diagnose the single gene disorder. So two things, single gene disorders and the number of the chromosomes. The process involves fragmenting the genome of the biopsied cells and then sequencing the resulting fragments. By counting the number of the sequences derived from the chromosomes, it is possible to determine how many copies of the chromosomes were in each cell, right? So the next generation sequencing, which is NGS, has the potential of high throughput analysis of many samples. It also has potential to significantly reduce the cost of the genetic testing, and workup is not required to make a genetic diagnosis. Okay, so this is a very new upcoming technology, checks the number of the chromosomes, also checks the single gene disorders. Now something called as NIPT, very upcoming thing, cell-free fetal DNA, a non-invasive technique of prenatal testing. Therein, we this this is a screening test for aneuploidies. So remember, this is a screening test and not a diagnostic test. You will require a diagnostic or a confirmatory test if the results are showing high risk. So CFF DNA comprises small fragments of fetal DNA thought to originate from the trophoblast. These fragments circulate in the maternal plasma and form approximately 10% of the DNA fragments in the maternal plasma, right? So when we take this maternal plasma from 10 weeks onwards, it can be seen, CFF DNA can be, we can analyze CFF DNA and we can see whether there is any aneuploidy that the baby may be having. And it remains there in the maternal plasma even up to hours after delivery. And after that, it goes up. So it is very specific to that pregnancy. So remember, this is a chart from one of the TOG articles from your part 2. So the sensitivity of CFF DNA is very high for Downs. It is 9.994, right? So for trisomy 18, it is 0.997. For trisomy 13, it is 0.906. And for monosomy X, it is 0.929. Okay. Right. So it is seen that it can really detect, and it's a very good screening test, but of course it requires the confirmatory test to for taking the decision of whether to implant the embryo or whether the baby should be carried, okay, in the pregnancy. Now these are the few techniques that we saw of finding out the genetic abnormalities. Now remember, when you want to check the single gene defect, you can use PCR, you can use karyomapping and NGS. For chromosomal rearrangement, you can go for PCR, FISH, CGH, karyomapping, but NGS cannot be used. So uh, chromosomal rearrangement means the reciprocal and Robertsonian translocation only. Okay. Aneuploidy screening, you can go for FISH. It will check 5 to 12 pairs of chromosomes. And CGH karyomapping and NGS can check 23 pairs of chromosomes. The workup time for PCR is 3 to 6 months, for FISH is 2 to 3 months, CGH is none, karyomapping is 4 to 6 weeks, and NGS is none. Okay, so this is for the final report to come up. So there are a few questions that are asked, and that will help you to solve and to find out what type of questions that are asked in genetics. So there is a patient who is 30-year-old, 19 weeks, of gestation with second trimester miscarriage, having growth restricted baby, polydactyly, cleft lip, cleft palate, and the postpartum shows holoprosencephaly, VSD, and we have seen that this is seen in P. polydactyly in Patau syndrome, okay, and holoprosencephaly. Now there is a school teacher. She is 10 weeks in her first pregnancy, having G6PD deficiency, and she is having her partner, sorry, having G6PD deficiency. She is fit and healthy, and she has been tested negative for the condition. The husband has got G6PD deficiency. Now, what is the risk of her child being a carrier? Now, we know G6PD is autosomal recessive disorder, and the bearing the disease is going to be 2 in 4, right? So that is of the babies having whose parents are having autosomal recessive disorders, they will be carrying around 50% of the time carrying. Okay, a healthy woman attends for pre-pregnancy counseling. Her brother has got cystic fibrosis, but husband is British white and he has been tested negative. Now, what is the risk of them having a child with cystic fibrosis? Now, remember, the husband is negative, the mother is negative. Of course, there is no risk to the baby, but there is always an underlying risk that we check that, because there can be an error, because there's a very high incidence in the Caucasians. Around 1 in 25 of the British population gets affected by cystic fibrosis, and that's why we do consider them. But here, because in the from the options, we can say that there is no risk to the baby. And here there is a 150 centimeter tall female having low hairline and having secondary amenorrhea. We just saw she was diagnosed as having premature ovarian failure. We saw that the Turner's mosaic patients will have such conditions. So it is option B, right? So I hope this session was useful for you. I've tried to involve all the things that are related to genetics, and remember, you have to be really very quick with the family tree, because you will have to draw it many a times, and you know how to draw a family tree. So when you have dominant autosomal dominant conditions there, you know that even if there is one mutant allele, the baby is affected. In autosomal recessive, you should have both the genes affect mutant to for the baby to get affected. Otherwise, they are just carriers. And the X-linked recessive and X-linked dominant will also act in the same way. So uh, I now you practice drawing the family tree. That's the only thing from the session that needs to be practiced by you, and that is remaining, of course, because that is a exercise that needs to be done by you guys. So I hope it's been useful. Thank you very much, guys.